If you are new, welcome. If not, welcome back. Today, I'm going to be going over the video modes on the iPhone 13 Pro Max, including cinematic mode and macro time-lapse. I cannot wait to show you. So stay tuned for more. So on the TrueDepth camera, it shoots at HDR with Dolby Vision up to 60 frames per second. At 4K. And there is a cinematic mode up to 1080p at 30 frames per second. 4K video at 24, 25, 30, and 60 frames per second. 1080p at 25, 30, or 60 frames per second. 720p HD at 30 frames per second. ProRes 1080p at 25, 30, and 60 frames per second. And 4K at 24, 25, and 30 frames per second. There is no option for 60 frames per second on the ProRes. Now, if you have an iPhone 13 Pro Max with 128 gigabytes, you're gonna be capped out at 1080p at 30 frames per second. Another cool thing about the camera is you can change the exposure settings. Now you have to do this before you press record or else it won't work. Here, I'm filming at -2.0. Footage is a bit darker. Here, we're at the standard 0.0. The lighting is balanced. This is what 2.0 looks like. It's actually sunny outside, so my face is really bright. It looks bad. Another thing with the camera is you cannot flip it around while you're filming like you can on a Galaxy phone or other Android phones. Something I use often is the QuickTake video mode. Press and hold on the shutter button to shoot a video from the photo mode. So here I can actually change how wide I want the shot to be. So here, tap on the screen. Tap on the two arrows that are pointing inwards. This shot is wider. And then here, switch it back. Here I'm actually shooting at a 1:1 aspect ratio. Let's see. Not bad. Still not gonna use this. All right, so this is the 4:3 aspect ratio. And then here, see if we can get a wider shot. Boom, just like that. And here is 16:9, by far my favorite aspect ratio, that or 4:3. And then here, zoomed in and then zoomed out. So on the TrueDepth camera, it can shoot slow motion 1080p at 120 frames per second. Can also shoot a time-lapse 1080p at 30 frames per second. You can also change the exposure settings before filming the time-lapse, so hit the little arrow at the top, and then here you can click and drag around to which one you want. -1.0, 0.0, and 2.0. On the TrueDepth camera, you can actually shoot a night mode time-lapse. Although it is hard to see, there is movement in the clouds here. On the TrueDepth camera, we have cinematic video stabilization at 720p, 1080p, and 4K. Okay, so looking at it while I was running, it was very shaky, but not like that. I will say that the digital optical sensor inside the camera has done its job and made the video look a lot more smooth, even though it's still shaky. All right, so we're gonna do the cinematic mode, different from the cinematic video. So the two things is the stabilization and then the cinematic mode. The cinematic mode is the bokeh effect, and the cinematic video stabilization is the stabilization on the TrueDepth camera and also the rear camera. So let's go. See if it can keep the focus on my face. Looks like it did its job, but it was a little choppy. All right, so we're gonna test the stabilization on the QuickTake video mode, slow motion, and time lapse. Let's go with the QuickTake first. A little bit choppy, not too bad. Slow motion. Okay, so looking back at it, the QuickTake video is all right. It's a little bit shaky. Now the slow motion, that was really cool. It was a little, wobbly, but the effect of saying slow motion and then it goes into slow motion, that was pretty cool. And then the time lapse was way too fast. I ran 2 laps around the yard and it still is less than a second long, which makes sense. But also the choppiness was just awful. So in the rear of the iPhone, we had 3 main lenses: telephoto, wide, and ultra wide. Telephoto at f2.8, wide at f1.5, and ultra wide at f1.8. There is cinematic mode at 1080p, 30 frames per second. And you can also zoom in, but you have to zoom in before you take the video. So here we're at 1x zoom. All right, so this is the sound quality on the cinematic mode. On the rear camera, not bad. Here we're at 3x zoom in a relatively quiet area. Not bad. And here's a 3x zoom. Actually, you can see right here how it focuses on this light pole, which is really cool. And then I go like this, and it focuses on this building. The sound quality is rather loud here. So we're using 1x zoom on the cinematic mode. We're gonna test the stabilization. a bit choppy.
3x zoom stabilization, cinematic mode.
This looks absolutely horrendous. HDR video recording with Dolby Vision up to 4K at 60 frames per second. 4K video recording at 24, 25, 30, and 60 frames per second. 1080p at 25, 30, and 60 frames per second. 720p HD at 30 frames per second. We have ProRes video recording up to 4K at 30 frames per second. Now, if you have an iPhone 13 with 128 gigabytes of storage, you're gonna be capped out at 1080p, 30 frames per second. Macro video recording, including slow motion and time lapse. There's also dual optical image stabilization for video, telephoto, and wide. Dual optical image stabilization means that the telephoto and the wide lens both have an optical image stabilization unit, which means smoother video, but not as smooth as the sensor shift stabilization. It appears that there is no stabilization on the ultra wide lens, so let's go. That looked absolutely horrendous. So here we have the wide. All right, let's try the stabilization here. Not too bad. Telephoto. Bit shaky. Sensor shift optical image stabilization for video on the wide. So with sensor shift stabilization, the stabilization occurs on the sensor rather than the camera lens, which makes for more fluid movement and better stabilization. We're gonna test this and we're gonna take a photo while we're running to see if the stabilization is any good. All right. Here's an 8 megapixel still taken while I was running using the video mode. Now the stabilization is pretty good, except for the fact that if you look closely, it's a little bit blurry, but if you stand back from the photo, it's not as bad, but it's still pretty good for stabilization. I will say that. 3x optical zoom in and 2x optical zoom out. 6x optical zoom range. Digital zoom up to 9 times. Okay. Not too bad for stabilization. See these green leaves here? Not the greatest video quality, but it's still usable. There's also audio zoom on the camera, which is pretty cool. See if you can hear the wind any better here. I won't be able to tell until I go and edit the footage, but it is pretty decent. There is also a TrueTone flash, and here we're using the ultra-wide camera. I remember on my S10 Plus, I was not able to record video with the flash on the ultra-wide camera. So this is pretty good. Also, we can zoom in here. So now we're gonna go see what it's like in the dark. So this is what the flash looks like. I'm actually in a field here where there's a tree line. But if I look down, you can see the grass, and then look around, you can hardly see anything until I get near the tree line, like here, for example. And then I can zoom in. Let's see if this actually adds any effect. Just a little bit. Once I put my hand here, you can see the hand. And once I get closer, see the amount of light reflected off the trees here. I mean, it's not bad. I will say that. You can zoom in all the way up there. So here we are in 1x again, 3x. Now I'm gonna go from 3x with this exact branch to 9x to see if there's any difference. See, you can hardly see it. So, I mean, it's not powerful, but it'll do the job. Like here, for example, that is cool. So you go from 3x all the way up to 9x. QuickTake video. Let's check the stabilization of this. Not too bad. I can actually zoom in here 15x and then all the way back to 0.5. That's cool. Slow-mo video support for 1080p at 120 frames per second or 240 frames per second. 120. 140. In slow motion video, you can select which lens you would like to use. So here is 0.5, 1, and 3. Then you can go all the way up to 9 if you want. And same with time-lapse, you can go all the way to 0.5, 1, 3, and then all the way up to 3 it looks like. Time-lapse video with stabilization. Night mode time-lapse. Cinematic video stabilization at 720p, 1080p, and 4K. All right, so let's try it. Not bad. Continuous autofocus video. Not too bad. You can take an 8 megapixel still while recording 4K video. Here's the 8 megapixel still shot while recording in 4K. This is a decent looking photo. I would not use this though. Also the option for playback zoom. So go find a video in your camera roll and then tap play. And then here you can actually zoom in. And you can also zoom out. Boom, just like that. You can change the formats that your videos are recorded in. So go into your settings, go down to camera and tap on it. Here at the top, we have formats, high efficiency and most compatible to reduce file size, capture photos and videos in the high efficiency HEIF or HEVC format. Most compatible will always use IPEG or H.264 cinematic video, 4K at 60 frames per second, 1080p at 240 frames per second, and HDR video require high efficiency. And then, of course, we have Apple ProRes, show camera control for ProRes. ProRes is one of the most popular formats for video professional post-production. A minute of 10-bit HDR ProRes is approximately 1.7 gigabytes for HD and 6 gigabytes for 4K. ProRes capture is supported for up to 30 frames per second and 4K up to 60 frames per second at 1080p. And this is mono recording, where there is one track of sound. And stereo recording has 2 channels of sound. That is pretty much it for the iPhone 13 Pro Max video test video. Now, if you like the video, make sure you drop a like on it, comment down below, and I will interact with you down there. Make sure you share with your friends and family. Also, make sure you're subscribed, turn on the post notifications, join my notification squad. And if I miss anything, let me know in the comments section down below. Thank you for taking the time out of your day or night to watch, listen, or however you consume my content. I really appreciate that. And I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are. Thank you again. I'll see you soon. Peace out.